go. All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome you to the public hearing for a site development permit for middle school number 6 in Talus. It's site development permit 19-00002. And I'd like to welcome you all. It's obvious that you made a commitment to get through this kind of snowy. It wasn't Snowmageddon, but it was snowy at least. And so the city has tracked the weather throughout the week, and they made the decision around noon today to go ahead and hold tonight's public meeting or public hearing as scheduled. That we recognize that not everybody or everyone would feel comfortable driving to the meeting, and so regardless of that, we want to hear your comments. And if you aren't able to attend, we'd like you to email your comments to the staff at lucy.s@issaquahwashington.gov. Or you can go on the city website at the Development Commission page and find her email address there. And we'll also take comments at the continuation of the public hearing on Wednesday, February 5th, though we hope to hear from you sooner rather than later. Your comments are always welcome and encouraged. The sooner we get them, the better and more effective we are at being able to effectively answer or comment on them. So I have an administrative process that I have to go through. We have some minutes from our December 4th, 2019 and December 18th, 2019, and the minutes have been sent out in advance of this meeting, and I'm presuming that you've all had a chance to read them. Mm-hmm. Are there any corrections or revisions to them?
No. Mr. Chairman, on minutes of December 18, it shows me present at that meeting. I was not present at that meeting. I believe that may be a copy-paste from a previous continuation.
Okay, we can make that edit correction. So other comments or corrections? Hearing only that one, we'll presume that the minutes are approved as edited. So let's begin our public hearing.
Good evening and Happy New Year, Commissioners. Wow, it's a full house. That's lovely. I'm just going to walk you through the process on quasi-judicial review and remind you of the aspects of that. A quasi-judicial permit needs to be both be fair and appear fair, and so there's certain due process that we follow. Part of it is procedural, meaning that we follow certain procedures. That includes notifying people in a certain way and focusing on the decision maker's relationship to the applicant. And the second piece has to do with the substantive due process, or the substance on which you make your decision, and that is adopted regulations. And to determine your relationship with the applicant, we'll go through a series of questions. So I'd like to have you read through these 6 questions, and then I'll ask for your responses. How many people answer no to all the questions? Super. Anybody answer yes, just for documentation? And then the second piece of this has to do with ex parte communication. All of our decision-making and building of the record associated with this permit needs to be done in a public setting, such as this public hearing. And so if you've had any email conversations, communications about this permit outside of this setting, I'd like you to identify that at this time. Has anyone had any ex parte communication? Okay. Does the applicant challenge any of the commissioners' participation? Okay. That's it. Thank you.
I might interrupt just for a second. Just in case you may not know, we all have computers on our desk here, so it's not like we're ignoring what's on the screen. We can see it on this screen. Just so, I mean, I was thinking that might look kind of weird. You know? Just so you know.
Okay, good evening. I'm Katie Cody, the project planner for this site development permit. Before I get started, I wanted to mention a couple housekeeping items. First of all, thank you to those of you who signed in on the sign-in sheet. We encourage everyone to sign in if you're not already on our email list. If you put your name and email, we'll make sure to keep you informed on what's going on with the project and upcoming meetings. Even if you don't want to speak tonight, you can indicate that. It'd be great if you could put your name and email on the list. It's right up there by the podium. And then also I wanted to mention quickly in the staff report, we noticed there were a couple figure numbers that were incorrect. So we apologize if that was confusing. Hopefully you guys were able to wade through. We try our best to make things accurate, but sometimes things slip through. So this permit tonight is a level 3 quasi-judicial permit. This is our public notice that we've conducted. There has been a notice of application back in April. There's been a sign on the site since May. It was also updated recently to include the new meeting date for tonight. We also published legal notice in the newspaper and sent out legal notice to adjacent property owners as well as the parties of record list. When a decision is ultimately made, we will also send a notice of decision out to all the parties of record and the adjacent property owners. So the proposed development site is in the Talus community. It's off of SR 900 and Talus Drive. The project was formerly zoned for an office campus as part of the Talus development agreement. It's now zoned, as of just this past month, it's now zoned community facilities, which is a zone that allows middle schools. The existing conditions at the site, you can see that the site's been heavily graded. This is because a office development was actually approved for the site. A site development permit was approved, and that development began site work and then stopped and never went forward. So when the school district purchased the property, it had already been graded, and they'll do some additional grading to make it work for their school project, but we're not dealing with a site that's in its natural condition. So as you can see, the site is in red. It's at the base of the Talus community. Just adjacent to it, across Falcon Way, is the Timber Ridge residential community. Talus Drive and Falcon Way intersect at the corner of the property here. And I just wanted to take a quick moment to talk about the different codes and regulations that apply to this site. Because it was originally part of a development agreement, the replacement regulations apply to this site, and where the Talus replacement regulations don't specifically address some specific development standard or element, then we look to the central Issaquah standards in most cases. And if the development standards aren't specific to address an element, we then look to the municipal code. So it was a little confusing to know which standard to apply to different development elements, but one of the attachments to the staff report is an interpretation memo where staff tried to be very clear about which parts of the code were applying to different parts of the development. The City of Issaquah is not the SEPA authority on this project, so we did not conduct the SEPA review. The Issaquah School District is the SEPA lead, and at this point, they haven't concluded their SEPA process. They're still working on that, and we understand they hope to complete it soon. But at this point, we've commented on their draft SEPA checklist, which we included with the staff report as well, and we're hopeful that a determination will be made before we meet again in February. during the public comment period for the notice of application sent out by the city, and since then, we've collected some comments mostly around traffic safety, bus routing, pedestrian access to the site, and some items discussing the aesthetics of the project, and I'll talk about each of these later in my presentation. So here is the site plan. The proposed middle school is built into the slope, so there's a pretty significant grade change from the top of the site to the bottom. It's about 150 feet of grade change. So the middle school takes advantage of that by being a shorter building at the top of the site and then a much taller building at the bottom. A track here, oh, where is it? This is a multi-use athletic field with a track. It's located sort of maybe 30 feet below this road here. We'll look at sections in a moment. But just to give you an idea of the cascading down, this is a structured parking lot at the corner. And this here is the site's primary passenger entrance. So parents dropping off and picking up kids will come in here, will proceed down this aisle and loop around and then drop off kids at this plaza level here. The bus traffic will come up Talus and onto Falcon Way. They will also do a loop around and then queue up here where kids will get on or get off. And for those traveling to and from the school, this is a bridge that connects them so they don't have to go down and cross this pedestrian or the passenger drop-off area. And finally, the third access point is down at the bottom of the site. This is just for emergency and services and will be signed and gated to prevent general use and parents from using that as a drop-off location. In addition to the pedestrian accesses that come off of Falcon Way and off of Talus Drive, there's a trail at the bottom of the site. This is an extension of the existing trail system, and it travels from Falcon Way down to Talus Drive. It's relatively steep. There's lots of stairs. So this isn't envisioned as a biking trail. It's very much just a walking trail. So the site itself is about 9 acres. The school district has said that the school will be built for a capacity of about 900 students and 80 staff members. The main main school building has 6 stories. As I mentioned, the parking garage has 2 levels. And we just wanted to call out that the capacity of 900 students assumes that all of the instruction will happen in the actual school building. There isn't any place where portables are proposed at this point. And the 80 staff members is also what we used in calculating things like the parking requirement. So in terms of the basic development standards, the project complies with floor area ratio, height setbacks, the build-to line, and impervious surface. The build-to line is measured from this portion of, where's my arrow? This northern portion of the access drive. This is the street frontage that will have the best relationship with the school itself. The grade change between Falcon Way and the school is too steep to make that a true relationship with the building. So the build-to line is, or the build-to line requirement is 20 feet or other architectural and plaza and landscaping elements. So they meet that by locating the garage and the building close to the street and then building this landscaped plaza with canopies. This is also the area where bike parking will take place, and this landscaping makes up that requirement here. So as I mentioned, there's quite a bit of grade change across the site. Several retaining walls are needed to create the large flat areas that will be needed for the athletic field and for the parking garage and some of the circulation routes. We wanted to make sure that the street wall here, although it's not relating to a building, that it still provides a human scale street wall to Falcon here. So we're requiring that that not only the barrier, the fall barrier be put there, but that it be a decorative fencing or a street wall element with landscaping that provides that human scale in the public realm. This shows how the site terraces down from Falcon Way at the top to the bus loop, to the drop-off loop, and then down to the track and field with the pedestrian access bridge here.
That's okay.
You can see it.
Okay.
There are several walls on this site that were proposed taller than the code would allow. This was necessary because of the large grade changes, and so the applicant has asked for administrative adjustment of standards to allow taller walls and larger grading, fill-in grading, and they've been granted that. We've approved that, and that's in the staff report as well. And the actual appearance of the walls is not in the purview of the city. It's under the purview of the Architectural Review Committee, the Talus Architectural Review Committee. The city will review all of the walls to make sure that they're structurally safe and that they meet engineering standards, as well as things like height and screening. But the appearance of the walls will be approved by the ARC. So they're contemplating walls that support this mountain village aesthetic that's approved for the Talus community. And there are different wall types that are proposed for different locations. And when the applicant presents, they may talk a little bit more about those specifically. So again, this is just providing additional information on the AAS. And so vehicular circulation, as I mentioned, there are 3 access ways and 3 driveways. The code standard that applies to this northern portion of the passenger drop-off is required to be the neighborhood street standard in the central Issaquah development design guidelines. And the same standard applies to Falcon Way, except that we heard some comment from Timber Ridge that they were concerned about the narrowness of the lanes. It's a 10-foot lane standard, and they were concerned that with the heavy bus usage there, that an 11-foot lane might make more sense. So we're encouraging the applicant to seek an AAS to approve a variation to that width of the lane just along Falcon Way here. So it would, well, there we go. It would apply to this portion of Falcon Way just until the bus driveway, and then this portion of the passenger drop-off area would need to meet the 10-foot standard. The emergency access drive will meet a different standard than these other 2, according to code. So here's just another depiction of the way the site circulation works. Whoops. The yellow highlighted areas here will be the drop-off zones for both for passenger and bus. That's the area that will be reserved for the queuing of those vehicles. We also heard some public comment earlier in the project with concerns that cars leaving the primary access drive would need to take a right, travel all the way down Talus, and then take a U-turn in order to go up the hill. That's not necessary. This will be designed to allow left turn to go up Talus Drive. And in fact, a traffic signal is proposed there, which I'll get to in a moment. So we have required a traffic impact analysis to be prepared for this site, and the result of that analysis was to propose a traffic signal at the primary access point here. And again, I'll let the applicant talk a little bit more about that in detail. But the primary concerns were school speed, maintaining an appropriate school speed zone in this area when children are present, and then managing the turning movements from Talus Drive onto the site. And also, it's not on this slide, unfortunately, but we're looking very closely at the SR 900 intersection with Talus Drive to make sure that during the busiest times of the day that intersection doesn't result in queuing that extends too long. In addition to mitigation that came out of the traffic impact analysis, we're also requiring the applicant to provide a construction management plan to address traffic during the construction phase, and address lane closures, flagging, on-site worker parking, notifying the community of days when maybe there could be more closures, and as we've done with other projects, we'll require normal updates to the city's website and perhaps even the applicant's website to provide a way for the community to know what's going on. The pedestrian circulation, as I mentioned, these blue arrows are all the different ways you can get onto the site as a walker. The red arrow here is the primary bike access. We are recognizing that we don't want to ask middle schoolers to share the road with cars, middle school bikers. So we've asked the applicant to widen this sidewalk here to 10 feet to allow plenty of space for people to come onto the site. And then once they get to this point where things narrow up due to the location of the building, they'll walk their bikes to the parking area here. And there are several ways to get onto the site as a walker. Many of them require walking up a lot of hills. So there was also a comment from the public asking whether there would be a sidewalk put on the northern side of Talus here. That's not part of the project. There will be, as I said, a traffic light here that would allow crossing of the driveway access, but it's not envisioned that we would be having students cross Talus. It's a little bit more about the trail. The trail had a small pathway here that would connect between the trail and the school site. We felt that it got a little bit lost in this turnaround area, so we have asked the applicant to add in a crossing and a trail to clearly mark the pedestrian path from the trail to the school's sidewalk there. So parking. Parking was an area that we also received a lot of public comment on. Neighbors were concerned that parking could spill out from the school site and fill up neighboring streets. So we asked the applicant to prepare a parking demand study. We wanted to understand what the actual demand for parking would be at a middle school site like this. So the traffic engineers studied a couple different middle schools in the area and watched their pattern of parking usage and determined that 81 spaces was an appropriate minimum parking standard to accommodate normal days with staff and volunteers and other comings and goings at the site. So they're actually proposing 122 spaces, which meets that with an additional buffer. And they're also meeting the other parking and loading standards for motorcycles, bikes, and other types of parking. But I did want to talk a little bit more about where they're providing their parking. And how parking will take place during special events. So the parking garage has 99 spaces that will always be available. There's a parking area down at the south part of the site that has 23 spaces that will always be available. And then there are 39 flex spaces that when the buses are parked or when vehicles are queuing up to drop off and pick up kids, those will not be available. But when those loading times are not happening or during special events, those can transition to parking spaces. So between the temporary flex spaces and then the two permanent areas, there's 122 spaces allowed. Is that right? I want to make sure I'm getting my math right. It's more than that. It's 161. Okay, 161. Thank you. So we've asked for some additional work to solidify a plan for special events. They've proposed several different strategies for dealing with special events where there's more parking. And it seems that with most events that this amount of parking will work. It'll meet the demand. There may be one or two events where it doesn't. So we're looking at potentially identifying another lot that could be shuttled to and from, or using flaggers or a permit system. And again, I'll let the applicant talk a little bit more about those strategies, but we're still working on firming up kind of a worst-case scenario parking plan for a special event. So as I mentioned, the Architectural Review Committee has the purview over the building's aesthetics. So if you think of it as kind of the aesthetics, the materials and finishes, that's in their purview. But the city is still looking at buildings for compliance with height and general urban design character. The general character isn't meeting that Mountain Village standard, and things like visual impact and screening and safety. So one of the things we looked at were views and relationships with other properties. So this is you can see in this perspective, Timber Ridge here up on the hill. This would be the relationship between the field and that development. This here is a retaining wall or a series of retaining walls. We will require screening where they are taller than 4 feet. And then you can also see here a fence. The replacement regulations for Talus don't allow chain link fence unless it's needed for safety. This is proposed to be a black chain link fence though, because the school has proposed that that's actually the safest material to put right alongside a track because it has some give if someone were to run into it, and it has a smooth surface that won't get caught. So we are allowing that material just along the track and field. So here's the views of the project from Timber Ridge. And a section showing how the site steps down from the Timber Ridge at the top here to the fire lane at the bottom. There were 3 blank walls that we identified that were longer than 30 feet and require screening or architectural treatment. So there is a condition we've put in for that. This is the north and south elevations of the school building. And I'll let the applicant talk a little bit more about the building itself, but these are locations where they provided mechanical screening of their equipment on the roofs. And as I mentioned, fencing is also in our purview, and we will continue to work with them to figure out exactly the correct fencing design for the locations where fencing is needed for fall protection and for providing street wall. For landscaping, we are looking at things like plant spacing, general Mountain Village character, and standards for parking lot interior landscaping percentages for that. The ARC would be they would be looking at specific plant type selection. That would be in their purview, or plant mix, and we would want to make sure that in general it met that mountain village character. So this is, you can see here the evergreen landscaping and lower shrubs that they've proposed here. This corner is the corner of Falcon and Talus. This is a corner that's going to receive special treatment just because of its it's a focal point coming into the site. So they've proposed doing some pedestrian amenities, maybe some sculptural rock or some benches or something like that. The site is providing, they meet their minimum tree density requirement. The minimum is 205 trees, and they provide 309. They do not meet the tree retention requirement. The site was cleared pretty heavily before they purchased the property, but there still were trees on site. And they're required to preserve 25% of the significant tree diameter, and they're proposing to save 15%. And they've sought an AAS for that, which was approved with the condition that they look at whether they might be able to save smaller trees, smaller groupings of trees that would meet that, the remaining caliper inches they need to get to that 25%. So with the tree retention calculations, we're looking at larger trees primarily, 6 inches and larger. And so we're saying there's a criteria in code that allows when you can save a grouping of smaller trees that make up that same diameter inches, you can reduce the retention requirement. So in this, these are the trees they're saving in the circles here. There's 3 trees, and then those make up 50 of the 84 required inches. And the applicant is looking at this area here to see if they can make up the additional 34 inches required with smaller trees, and it seems like that they can probably get close doing that. So the track will have exterior lighting. This is a picture of the type of light that's being proposed for the site. We are asking that we're asking that SEPA conditions be applied that would limit lighting to no later than 8 p.m. and no amplified sound at the field. And this is something that the code doesn't directly address, so it is appropriate that it's addressed through SEPA. The lighting themselves, although they will be tall, actually are still below the street level of Falcon here. This orange line is the top of the light. So it will not be a visual impact to Timber Ridge. If they're looking straight, they will be able to see the field as we saw from those other perspectives. But the lighting fixtures are required to be focused downcast with shielding to reduce offsite glare. The site has an existing stormwater pond, but the site drainage is going to be completely changed, and a retention vault will be placed under the athletic field. So all the site will drain to this location here. And here is the school as you see it from SR 900. So I just wanted to mention before I end that if you're interested in commenting, please sign in on the sign-in sheet. And if you're interested in just receiving emails, please sign in as well. Thank you.
So we'll get a presentation from the applicant.
Is this good?
Thank you for the opportunity to present in front of you tonight. My name is Rebecca Bayback. I'm principal architect with Integris Architecture. And we are extremely excited to not only be here with you tonight, but to be the architects for this project. Our firm has a 67-year history doing civic facilities with really a focus on educational facilities. So we take very seriously the responsibility that the school district has given us tonight, and want to kind of walk you through our process. There's a little bit of overlap with what the city's already presented, so I'll try to cover those items quickly. In addition to myself here tonight, we've got representatives from the school district capital projects team. Kim Young, who I believe is on your agenda, has been my partner in crime as we've been leading this team on this project. We have our construction partner here with Cornerstone Construction, our landscape architect, and our traffic engineer. So as there are questions, we have the team here to assist in responding. So we're going to walk through a few items that have been covered and a few others we're going to try to address a little bit more detail. As was mentioned, we have gotten some comments through our community process, and we want to try to continue to evolve the design and respond to those as we hear them. To begin with an overview of the site, as was mentioned, there's a lot of factors in developing this site, and we really appreciate Ken and Brookie from the Talus community that has really dedicated a lot of time, in addition to the city of Issaquah, and really helping us develop the approach to this site. And we'll walk you through really specifically how some of those influences developed in this facility. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with the details, but it is a new 145,000 square foot facility for 900 students. And we get a lot of questions about where the students are going to come from for this school and how we're going to determine that process. And the Issaquah School District has identified that they're going to begin a reboundering process in the spring of 2020, so just in a few months now. And they're beginning to put the team together for that process. So if you get asked questions or if you're interested, please check out the school district website for more information. As we look at the site, I want to just highlight a few of the features. A lot of them were covered about how the vehicles were going to access the site. And we talked a lot. I've got to find my arrow here. I'm used to having a laser pointer. So we talked a little bit about the parent drop-off for the site, the bus access on the site, and the emergency vehicle site. So the 11-foot lanes that were talked about, the widening that we're going to do on Falcon Drive is from this access point for those buses directly up onto Falcon. And just to look at that a little bit larger on the site, it helps to kind of see it larger than life for those who can see the big screen. Sorry, this is taking me a minute to get used to this arrow thing. Well, I'll just talk with words. Do you have a laser? Okay, that would help, thank you. So as we look at the enlarged plan of the north end of the site, I just want to talk about how long some of these queue areas are. So the queue area, oh, there you go, thank you. So the queue area is 1,700 feet long for the parents that queue on the site. And when you look at the enlarged plan, it really helps to kind of see it larger. And they come down and they use this roundabout, and then they get back into this queue. And really providing a place for that amount of queuing was really important. The trail is one of the community amenities on the south end of the site here. And the field itself also is a community amenity. And there was some question at a community meeting about how the access to that field is for those who want to use it. It will be restricted to school use during the school day for those 900 students. But the district has an established policy that allows the public to get a key card access to the site, and they can use it when it is lit. Obviously, they don't want folks on the field when it's not safe to be there when there's no light. And then the bus loop area, we've talked quite a bit about, so I'll continue on from that area. And I wanted to, some of you may have just seen that orange square come up here. I wanted to just take a moment and walk you through the building. As architects, this site with 150-foot elevation change is a really interesting challenge. And so just to go back for 1 minute, as we're looking at that field and the student access and connection to the building, this orange corner right here is where the gymnasiums are. And they have a balcony that comes out and stairs that go directly down to the field. So our gymnasium is on the first floor. We have a main gym with an auxiliary gym and a fitness room and then some classroom areas. And then our service components begin to kind of tucked into that hillside. As we move up through the building to the second floor, taking advantage of the 2-story volume that our gymnasiums take, adjacent to it we have our locker room spaces. This light yellow that you see on the plan, that is our corridors. And these green areas are science classrooms, and then that bluish gray, those are general classrooms. And we have our primary circulation with stairwells right in this corner of the building, and you'll see that in the building expression. And at the north end, there is a primary stairwell that you see expressed through the building. Continuing up to the third floor, which we affectionately refer to as the main floor, is where students that are approaching the site, as was discussed, via bike or walking onto the site, the front door is right opposite our 2-story parking structure, which is across the main road that snakes through the site here. Our administration is this orange area with counseling off to the side that really provide the supervision for those areas of the site. And also, because of the office nature, we have a really nice texture of windows along that edge. And then the classrooms continue in the wing to the upper right-hand side. We have some special programs that are along that edge. And then the grand kind of space as you walk through the entry is our cafeteria commons that really takes advantage of those views out to the south. The kitchen is directly adjacent to that space, and there is an exterior area with our covered play. So students that are arriving, if they get dropped off at the bus lane, they are able to come into this area. A few of them may have the opportunity to come directly to the covered play. And then students that arrive with the pedestrian bridge and the next level, I'll show you, they'll come down some stairs and arrive at that covered play area. So we have a really large covered gathering area for our students if they arrive outside of school hours. And then we have a stage platform area that then allows this building to be a community benefit after school hours as well for those large group functions. Continuing up in the building to the 4th floor, we have additional classrooms that are on either side of this yellow corridor. And then directly off this yellow corridor to my left is the bridge that connects to a covered waiting area right along the bus loop area. And so there's a generous sidewalk for our students as well as a little covered area. And the school administration has told us that they work very closely to make sure that the buses are there, and so students will go directly onto those buses at the end of the school day. And then continuing up to the top floor of the building, we've taken advantage of the spectacular views that you have from the east side of the building with locating our library there, which is where these different color shapes are. That's all library space, and our music classrooms. We also have our art room and our staff room up on the upper level. So that just gives you an overview of how we're fitting 900 students on this site, along with the track and field. In development of the building, as was mentioned, we really need to bring a lot of factors together in the design of the building. As architects, we're not only responding to building codes and the client's expectations for durability. They remind us frequently that we're designing a 50-year building that really is going to be a part of this community for a long time. We also are thinking about the city's expectations for zoning and how we must step the building with the grades of the site. We've been working with the Architectural Review Committee, specifically David Mead, who represents the Talus Homeowners Association in that process, and really thinking about the materials. And as we've gone through the material selections for this process, we've been thinking about how do we create texture on this building and really provide that longevity and being good stewards of those resources. So a majority of the building is going to be, there'll be a lot of masonry units on the building. We've got 2 different colors. So those are like concrete block, but we're using a thinner profile. And then we've got a lot of metal panel with some different widths and depths to get some really nice shadow lines and nice trim pieces. We're also bringing in a phenolic panel that provides the longevity that the school district expects, but brings in the wood character in wood paneling. And so you'll see that on the elevations. And then we have some other areas where, particularly at entry areas, where we've clad the steel structure with wood to really give it that mountain feel. We're walking that line between creating that civic facility that really speaks to the campus feel for the this type of facility and the expectations that are different for some of the residential buildings that are built in this community. So as we look at it with a little bit more detail, this is an architectural axonometric. Some of you who are used to looking at this, it's pretty familiar. Others, it looks a little funny because like we sliced the building. But you can see where we've really integrated a lot of windows to all of our teaching spaces so that there'll be great daylight for these buildings. The CMU veneer, as I mentioned, it's a 4x16 piece, so it's real thin. That provides a lot of texture and durability at the lower levels, and then metal panel, and then that wood phenolic panel. And you'll see those materials used on the exterior of the building. As I mentioned, we're also building a parking structure, and so we wanted to parallel a lot of the materials to really create that campus feel, that college-like campus feel. So we've got the same masonry veneer units and metal panels applied to those components of the building as well. And we do have the actual materials here for those that are not in the room. Some people may be able to look at them because sometimes colors are distorted in digital images. This is a view that you saw earlier, but I really wanted to highlight how the wood is used to highlight the entry. So as you are walking down that primary sidewalk toward the front of the building, the wood provides that cue of where that entry is. The canopy's a little obscured by the trees, but that's all wood-clad structure in the underside of that canopy and in this area. And then we've got wood-clad structure at the overhangs on the building. And we've worked with all the parties that I've mentioned to really look at some of the slopes of the building and really stepping the building and breaking down these walls. There's a couple places that we're doing a little bit more work, but we've been putting a lot of study into this development. Just to give you a couple more views of the building, so this is as we're going up Talus Drive. You can see how well screened the parking structure is, and it really tucks into that hillside. The topography really allows us to draw your eye towards the building and the views for the building. And then as we step back, as you're approaching the building from Falcon, you can see kind of some early imagery around some of the landscaping. You can see that the covered play area that I mentioned, you were able to look right above that. We brought in the exposed rafters at the covered play area as well. Continuing around the site, I think it's always fun if you imagine yourself up at the Timber Ridge Plaza and you're looking across as this site is developed and how the buses really do disappear from view. Again, where the topography really gives us some unique vantage points. The track obviously has its presence in the building with all of its screen mechanical units. This is the covered play that I mentioned. You'll see just right in this location where the covered waiting at the bus area is located. And then you can see the parking structure off to the left. Then a view of the building from Falcon Way. And again, at the overhangs, we brought in the wood structure there. So this is at the cafeteria common space. And then the gymnasium area is down below. And the covered play is off to our left. And the track is down below to the right. And you can see some of those railings that we were just talking about on the site. A view from the track and the field area. And then the view from SR 900. So I want to switch gears just a tiny bit and talk about some of the questions and comments that we've gotten about the building. As I mentioned, we've been working with Ken as he's been representing the Homeowners Association and really looking at what is the expression of that east retaining wall. Structurally, it needs to be a shotcrete wall in one area and a mechanically stabilized earth wall in other areas. So we're working with him to develop an approach to that material, and we landed on a sculpted shotcrete faced wall. So that'll really bring in the character of that mountain village to that wall. So that'll be the wall that you see as you're driving up Talus. And I'm just going to go back for 1 minute. I did want to highlight, and this was mentioned earlier, that the stormwater pond that folks are used to looking at was right here, and now all that stormwater is being managed underneath the field. And just to reiterate, because we've had a lot of conversations about parking, and I wanted to just kind of highlight the parking areas on the site. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. So the parking structure and the parking by the field, and then the event parking that comes in when we're not using the site for school pickup and drop off, but for events and other happenings. And as we think about parking for this site, not only is there pickup and drop off parallel to the school, but it's also important to note that the quantity of parking that we're proposing for this site will allow 40 parking stalls to be unused after the staff are there. That if a parent arrives and needs to go inside with their child, there's lots of parking stalls beyond the drop-off areas. So we get asked a lot about how the quantity of parking is determined, and this was covered by the city in several of their comments, but just to elaborate a little bit further, is there are guidelines for parking, and they also challenge us to reduce our requirements on vehicles. And so as we strive to develop strategies for finding that right number, we look at what's been done in other areas. And with the assistance of Heffron Transportation, they've really done some in-depth studies to look at how to approach this. And I just wanted to share some of these numbers. A couple of the schools that we profiled were the schools that had a larger population than what is proposed for middle school number 6. And really, we were able to look at what is their daily parking need and how does it compare with what we expect to need for middle school 6. And at 82 and 66, we feel like for 900 students that we're exceeding what we expect will be needed on a regular basis. And as was mentioned earlier, we've got 122 parking spots every day and 39 parking stalls after hours for a total of 161. And in addition to the event parking that is able to be accommodated with 161 spaces, the Issaquah School District and with the help of our traffic consultant, we've been working with the city to develop a traffic management plan that looks at how we can mitigate any sort of potential impact that might be developed as a result of this project. And the plan is to evaluate that on an annual basis. So to talk a little bit more about traffic, we've had several questions really wanting to understand how we're going to be responding to the impact of adding the middle school to Talus Drive in particular. We will have school zone speed limits on during the school hours, pickup and drop off times that will be enforced by the police department at 20 miles per hour. We'll have flashing beacons there. As mentioned, we are also providing a traffic signal to allow for those right and left turns and entrance onto the site and keeping traffic flowing in a timely fashion. So that will be located at the intersection of the middle school driveway and the Talus Drive. And there will be striping at Falcon Way, noting that you cannot block it. So if cars are stopped because of the traffic signal, they're not going to be able to block Falcon Way, so we don't have any sort of traffic congestion at that intersection. The other comments was just to talk a little bit about construction. During our recent community meeting, we did have a few folks want to understand what that short-term impact will be, and I'm going to actually ask our contractor, Brian Gormley from Cornerstone, to speak briefly to those.
Hi, Brian Gormley with Cornerstone General Contractors. We're the ones that signed up to build this thing. So as you can see, it's quite a site, very, very much of a challenge. But our goal in our time when we're there is to try to be the best neighbors that we can. But we wanted to touch on 3 items in particular today. Work hours, obviously, will be in compliance with local ordinances with the city of Issaquah and have a lot of familiarity doing that. We performed 4 other schools for Issaquah School District over the last 9 years or so, I think. And then parking and access. See if I can, the mouse has been a problem today, but we're gonna, our construction entrances will be the 3 entrances that are contemplated for the project. The lower 2 will be more primary. The one off of Falcon will be more limited as it's kind of a dead end area, but we will maintain those entrances during the construction phase. And then parking, we intend to have all the parking be on site. We're not going to park in any of the neighborhoods, and part of our responsibility as a contractor is to control that, with our folks. And lastly, some of the feedback we got at some of the community meetings was communicating well with them. And so we're working with the school district, the Talus community, and the city of Issaquah to develop a plan to do that during the construction phase. Thank you.
So I'm just going to use this slide to cover one other topic that's come up, and that is about how we're going to respond to bus ridership and conditions around snow, which has been a hot topic with the weather that we've had. I just wanted to highlight that the Issaquah School District does have a really strong history of really understanding what the predicted weather is and responding in advance to whether if a school is likely to be affected by the weather, they've canceled school. If they anticipate that the weather is going to change and the students are already at school, they make plans to allow the students to be released early. And in an extreme situation, they would be looking at alternative ways to get the kids down the Talus Drive to get onto buses. But based on the topography of the Issaquah School District, they have a really long history of navigating schools in locations where they have to think about the hills. Those were the comments that we've heard a lot through the community meetings. And so just to hit on a few items that are coming next, we've got the SEPA in process. That's one of the questions we get asked. We're going to be looking for your feedback, integration of comments that we've been getting from the staff report, and really looking forward to the rebounding process that will be coming in the spring and any other comments. So thank you.
Thank you. I would like to open the meeting to public comments. If you wish to make a comment, I would ask that you sign in, or at least, if you choose. As Katie indicated, we'd really like to be able to keep you in the communication loop, so that'll make life a little easier. And when you get to the podium, if you would please state your name and then give us your comments. And we look forward to hearing from you. So I can read off names of people signed in. Rebecca Bayback.
I spoke already.
Yes, you did. That's probably not the comments we expected. How about Bruce Semple? Semple? I apologize. I'm not really good at reading people's names, so.
This one or this one? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Bruce Semple. I live at 100 Timber Ridge Way Northwest in Issaquah. I am the Safety and Security Liaison for the Residents' Council of the Timber Ridge Continuing Care Retirement Community, of which you're all aware up on Talus, I'm sure. Our community has over 500 residents, and the majority of us continue to enjoy the privilege of driving and the independence it provides, in spite of our age. However, we've been contending for quite a long time with 9-foot travel lanes and 7-foot wide parking places around Timber Ridge, which is problematic and unnerving for many of our residents when facing oncoming 8 to 9 foot wide delivery trucks, particularly along Falcon Way on the east side. We often have to stop because of uncertainty that driving past wide oncoming trucks and vehicles is a safe maneuver. The unfortunately too frequent emergency vehicles on Timber Ridge Way on the west side can present a similar situation. Incidentally, all of our delivery for the maintenance of Timber Ridge, food and services all come in along Falcon Way on the east side. The current land use plans before you indicate two 10-foot wide travel lanes with 2 flanking 8-foot parking lanes at the north end of Falcon Way between the new school bus loop entrance and Talus Drive. The original submission had 11-foot wide travel lanes, but these were reduced to 10-foot because this is now the current street standard on Talus and on the Issaquah community in general. You have heard this evening that our request of the city to review and approve the 11-foot wide travel lanes is now looked upon favorably based on traffic analyses and the small section of roadway involved, and we're very pleased to hear that. It is hoped that the Commission will agree with this. It would be a confidence-building and most welcome outcome for our residents facing the additional challenge each morning of the vision of 18 8-foot wide school buses in addition to the delivery trucks turning into Falcon Way. It would certainly add to the overall safety and security of our large population of senior drivers. Such a limited exception would not detract from the overall current street standard of 10-foot in Issaquah, and would provide benefits not only for our residents, but also for bus and truck drivers using this intersection when they're turning into Falcon Way from Talus Drive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jason Morris.
Good evening. My name is Jason Morris, and I am currently the Executive Director of Middle School Education for the Issaquah School District. During my career in Issaquah, the last 16 years, I've served as an assistant principal at Issaquah Middle School, the principal of Maywood Middle School, and the director of facilities for the Issaquah School District. And tonight, I speak to you in support of approving the project for middle school number 6 at the Talus site for the Issaquah School District. During my 16 years in the Issaquah School District and 21 years total career, I've spent all of those years, excepting my 1 year in facilities, as a middle school teacher, a middle school administrator, or a supervisor of middle school programs for the district. And I would encourage the development and moving forward with Middle School 6. A little history about our current middle school situation. We have 5 middle schools in the district as we speak. Next year, 4 of those are they are currently, or rather next year, they're projected to be over 1,000 students each, with Maywood Middle School as our biggest school at over 1,200 students. So as you can see by those numbers, our middle schools are crowded. They're facing stress on the facilities due to that overcrowding, and a 6th middle school will provide relief for our middle school programs in the Issaquah School District. Adding a 6th middle school will reduce our average per middle school from just over 1,000 students per school to approximately 870 per school, which is still a rather large middle school, but much more manageable than our schools that are currently over 1,000 students, and certainly Maywood Middle School, which is over 1,200 next year. An additional middle school will also bring facilities to our community, our students, and our neighbors. It will provide track and field space and gym space for our school activities, for athletics and programs. You saw the plan theater as well, or at least a stage for those types of performances. Those facilities will also be available to community user groups and community sports teams, which if you have children who play sports, acquiring fields can be a challenge, and this would provide an additional field and track and gymnasium space that will be open to the public. Currently, all of our middle schools do allow access during non-school activity hours and a process for gaining access, a key or a key card to access those sites. We're working to build smart buildings, compact design to be good neighbors within the community, and to obviously design schools that are visually appealing and workable for our systems. I look forward to partnering with the City of Issaquah, the Talus community, and the Timber Ridge community, as hopefully we can be their neighbors and be excellent neighbors at that. So I speak in support of Middle School 6 at the Talus site. Thank you.
Thank you. Christy Anderson.
Good evening. My name is Christy Anderson. I live in Talus, and I'm also the chair of the Landscape Committee for the whole Talus community. And I would just like to reiterate a couple of points tonight for you. One is that Talus Drive is the entrance to our whole community, and we've been working really hard over the past several years to make that into something that we're really proud of. And I'm looking forward to seeing the landscape plan so we can continue to have that on our Talus Drive, because this is going to be quite a visible site. But one thing I haven't seen yet, which I would like to have some reassurance on, is that there's also a comprehensive maintenance plan for the landscaping. Dealing with Talus as a whole, because it's a relatively new community, one thing that I've had to deal with as the landscape chair is that the plantings the developers put in were gorgeous when they first built the houses, and now they're not so gorgeous. So the maintenance plan, the long-term plan of these landscapes would be really important to us as a community, and I would appreciate the consideration on that. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Ken Eastman, Eastman, sorry.
Katie is working to get my presentation up.
How about you stand here?
I will. I just want to say, before I get into the presentation, that the Talus Residential Association, which I represent tonight, is supportive of the middle school in the Talus community. We've been working with not only the school team, but also the city staff development services team. So I think we've got a good working relationship. We've been able to accomplish a whole lot. Quite frankly, the final issue I want to talk about is safety on Talus Drive. So the question is Talus Drive safe? And does the building of a school impact that? Well, the school district and the city believe so. The only change on Talus Drive is that there'll be a flashing school speed limit sign. The Issaquah School District's traffic impact analysis says that's good enough. City staff doesn't seem to disagree with that. But what I want to talk about tonight is city study in 2018 said that there's over 1,000 cars a day that go up and down Talus Drive and exceed the speed limit by 10 miles an hour or more. In addition to that, there's been recent accidents that suggest that Talus Drive does have a problem with speeding and distracted drivers. 1,000 times a day, those are the radar signs in front of Timber Ridge that will be in the school zone. This is the study that I referenced. This was done in the fall of 2018. Not only the 1,000 cars a day going over 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, but 1,000 cars a week that are exceeding the speed limit by 15 miles an hour. So that's 40 miles an hour going up and down that steep hill. Those red stars are the property damage that we've suffered as the Talus Residential Association. Those are the dates. Those are vehicles that left the road and managed to hit something. And this is the city police report on that same stretch of Talus Drive. And these incidents don't always coincide with the stars on my map, because they may not have been property damage related, but they've been collisions, and the Issaquah police have records of all of these. Those are the incident numbers and the dates. So cars leave the street and hit light poles, they hit fire hydrants, they hit our street trees,
They leave the road, maybe they don't hit anything, but they're in the medians, they're in the sidewalk. Sometimes they rest in the median. And this was the last one 9 days ago on January 6th. Car came to rest on that utility box in the foreground. And if you reverse that image, that's Falcon Drive and Talus Way, and where that X is where that car came to rest, right near those two students walking to school. And what does IPD think about speeds on Talus Drive? Well, here's the citations. Speed too fast for conditions, driving well in excess of posted speed. Speeds too fast, and on and on and on. This last one I want to bring to your attention. The school district cites a WashDOT report that says there's only a handful of accidents on Talus Drive. That last one is a good anecdotal piece of information. Had it not been for the patrol officer following a trail of fluids up Talus Drive and into a neighborhood, they never would have found that car. There are hit and runs all of the time where cars leave the road and they're not in the WashDOT reports. And the Heffron transportation analysis that was done for the school district says that regularly exceed the posted speed limit. Talus residents speak out on Nextdoor about speed problems. Some people call it the Talus Speedway. And it can happen here. We all know about the bicyclist over on East Lake Sammamish that was tragically killed, or the little boy on Newport Way. Are we really willing to roll the dice on this with all this information? So the excessive speeds on Talus Drive, they're well documented, and it's a long-standing issue. And the city and the Issaquah School District have a responsibility for those 850 kids and those 150 staff that you're now going to place in this hazardous situation. So what do we want from you as commissioners? Before you agree on this site development permit, we want you to commit, or have the city and the school district commit to a plan to slow that traffic down on day one when that school opens and all those kids and all that staff are present. Photo enforced radar, speed tables are two things that could do that. We'd like the school district to buy that photo enforced radar and give it to the city to use on day one. So I'm asking you to keep our kids safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public wish to speak?
My name is Mary Lynch, and I reside at 2690 Northwest Oakcrest Drive, Issaquah, Washington. I first want to comment on the lighting. I'm glad to see that the field lighting has gotten added to the preliminary SEPA report, because I don't know if you remember, or you may not know what happened. Issaquah Middle, it was said it was not going to have lighting, and then all of a sudden lights appeared. I think this needs to be addressed now if there is going to be lighting. I think there also needs to be more of a neighborhood-wide study done on glare, because this is up above, and one of the issues that we have over at Issaquah Middle is those houses that are on the other side of 2nd Street that have all of a sudden now glare from the lights. So just because the glare is directed down and maybe Timber Ridge won't be impacted, you've got neighbors that are down along Newport or along S900 that are impacted, and you've got people across the way also on Squawk Mountain that will be impacted. So I think there needs to be a more thorough study. There also needs to be a more plan on how you're going to assure that there is no amplified music or sounds coming from that play field, not only during school, but when other users use it, to make sure there is some fine or penalty enforced so it doesn't happen, and also some procedures to control it. I want to also talk about then, I didn't see anything, I was just wondering, since this is supposed to be a new inventive school, is what are we doing to really reduce energy usage in this building? This is an ideal time to have solar energy on there. I don't see anything referenced to that or any way that that can be incorporated in other alternatives, energies, and reduced energy footprint and carbon footprint of this building, I think ought to be addressed in the school. Overall, you know, I'm for the school here because I would prefer it to be downtown in the central core area, not up on the hill. But if Talus is okay with it, I'm not going to argue that. But I do want to support what Ken just said about the having from day one your speed cameras, and it needs to be at the beginning and the end of the zones on all 4 directions to travel. Because what happens, if you've ever gone on 2nd Street, once those cars know where that speed zone is, they speed up before and after that. So those coming from 2nd Street or from Front Street turning north on 2nd, they speed all the way until they get to that zone, that camera zone, and then they slow down, most of them. So that needs to be at both ends of the zones as far as the speed cameras. My other concern is also semi-deliveries. The school also gets semi-deliveries, and the fact that that's now into the parent parking and drop-off. Quite frequently, those deliveries are at the time when school starts. I know because I'm over there at Issaquah Middle and some of the other schools. So my concern is how is that going to be controlled, and are those semis going to block the parent traffic during that time period? What is going to prevent parents, and they will do this, they will find any place they can drop their kids off, they will stop. They will stop out on Talus or Talus Drive and try and drop their kids off. They will go around Timber Ridge and drop their kids off on Falcon. That's, you know, so unless some things are put in place so that can't happen, parents will do that. My concern then also is parents parking in the bus zone areas. That is very consistently happens. You're talking about extra activities that happen there. Even on a day with graduation, whatever, we have tremendous troubles around the schools with parents parking in the bus zone areas. And what's going to prevent the parents from parking and blocking the bus zones? Because here the buses are going to have to go in and turn around. So that turnaround cannot be blocked either, which we have had happen over at the other schools quite a little bit. So that needs to be managed. My other concern is with the kids walking over the high crosswalk is what's going to prevent a kid from throwing something off of that high crosswalk into the parent traffic area. I haven't really seen the design of that crosswalk. Also, if it's a little bit cold, how is that crosswalk going to be designed so kids are not going to slip and slide? If it's metal, it's going to be slippery. If it's concrete, it's going to be slippery, and if they slip, they're going to be serious injuries. So that has to really be looked at, and maybe some sort of inlaid heating system or whatever to prevent ice and other buildup, and then also side protection so things can't be thrown off it. My other concern is if they're talking about bringing kids down to S900 if there's snow. That doesn't happen very nicely now with the snow routes. I don't know if any of you live in Talus, but you can ask the Talus people there. If we're on snow routes, the kids have to come down the hill to the bottom to get on at S900. And there's no nice places for the buses to pull over and let the kids on the bus because the cars are all down at the bottom blocking Talus Drive and blocking S900. So buses right now with today's loads for the middle, Issaquah High, and elementaries have a hard time if there's snow routes. So if you're talking about bringing an entire group of kids down to load the buses, I think that's really unreasonable. So things have to be resolved on what's going to be happening with plowing and other things that the kids could get on in the bus zones if there is snow and ice. Bringing them down to S900 is not a safe option at all for them to walk down there, let alone to have the buses pull off and load their students there. Because you're talking, I think, up to 20 buses that may be there. So how is that going to happen if they're all let out? How are you going to stage buses? And going up the hill, the buses were going to need some sort of way in the morning and the PM to be able to pull into that bus lane. They need a stoplight. So because cars coming down the hill are not going to stop. So how are you safely going to get those buses in when they're loaded with kids and you have bombs coming down the hill? You need a stoplight to stop the traffic, and maybe it's just during those hours when the buses are turning in and out. But it's not going to work without some way of stopping traffic, allowing the buses to go in, and then also allowing them to do it pretty frequently, or not frequently, but steadily, because if there's ice, buses are going to slide right back down that hill backwards. So some of those things need to be thought of a lot better than what I've seen them. Thank you.
Thank you. Last call, any other comments? So I will close the public portion of this hearing and turn the time over to the commissioners for their questions and comments, but questions first. So if you have questions for the developer or the city, this is your time.
A question for the applicant. Do you have some imagery or some additional detail you could provide on that bridge, on that pedestrian bridge that crosses into that bus waiting area? Maybe it was in some of the renderings.
Yeah, we do have additional details, but I do not have it with me.
Okay.
So we can follow up with that information.
Thank you.
Is there a throw fence or any, I don't know, cold weather provisions included in it right now?
So what are you asking?
Is there a throw fence, or which is like a tall fence so people can't throw things down below?
Yeah, we've been thinking about the fact that we do have middle school kids that will be utilizing this and their natural tendencies, and we've been working that into the design. It's really probably best if I just follow up with a response on that, because then I can show you all the detail, and we can even get you samples of product and things.
Is that pedestrian walk designed to be covered at this time, or is the walk not covered?
It is not covered. The intention is that it is similar to a sidewalk, and the students move at a reasonable walking pace across it, and if they need to linger, there is a covered area parallel with the bus drop-off area. So let's see if this mouse is working. There is a covered bus waiting area right here. But the intention is that the students move quickly from the building directly to the area where they would get on the bus.
Question, it doesn't look very wide for 900 students to get across. How wide is it?
10 feet? Yeah, so it's 10 feet wide. It's the same width as the sidewalk that's up there. And it will have, at the covered area parallel to the bus, there will be a gate. So after hours, you will not be able to cross it and access it. The school will have the opportunity to manage access to that pedestrian bridge so that it's only accessed when the administration at the school wants students to be utilizing it.
While you have this picture up, there was mention of a space available for 4 portables. Where is that?
We have not identified a place for portables.
Okay, I thought it said that there was, okay, anyway.
The intention was exactly the opposite. And I just want to clarify, because we may not have been clear, there is no place for portables identified at this time.
Okay.
There was the possibility of extending the wing, the north wing, towards Talus Drive, but that's not a part of this proposal. It's just simply identifying that in the future, the school district could come back and propose that expansion.
Yes.
So, excuse me, I had a question. It seems like traffic is a big thing with trying to figure out how we get to manage flow and make sure that there's no problems. So I saw there's a signal that's going to allow bus flow in and out. The bus going up the hill uses the standard car route, so it can turn easily in and out. Is there a percentage? I live in an area of the Highlands that serves, while it's an elementary school, a large number of kids, but they predominantly either dropped off or walked to school because there is no bus service within the boundary.
Right.
I read that there's 10% coming off Talus, 90% elsewhere. But is there an idea of any metric that would share how many people would utilize the bus versus drop off?
Yeah, so I'll give some highlights, and maybe the school district will need to elaborate a little further. I believe the school district has the highest in the state bus ridership for a school district, and I think it's over 50% of their kids is what they found at other sites. They are looking, as part of their being a good environmental steward and their sustainability goals, and also to alleviate traffic concerns, they are working on strategies to encourage greater bus ridership. Some of the strategies that are being brainstormed and they're not formally approved are, should they be providing Wi-Fi on buses? Are there some sort of reward system that a school can implement for students that consistently ride the bus? So they are actively trying to continue to grow their bus ridership because they see so many benefits for all parties involved.
Okay. The other, with regard to speed, in this same area that I live in is, obviously a 20-mile-an-hour zone for school. IPD's done a great job of being up there and having a presence. They've handed out enough tickets that almost everybody, with the exception of maybe somebody that doesn't know the area and flies through, comes to about a 20-mile-an-hour speed, and the people that don't are throttled by the cars in front of them that are. I think the idea of a speed camera or some sort of way to manage that is a good idea. Is there any plan? I mean, I don't know if it was just brought up tonight or if it was something that was more thought out, but anything beyond the concept of a flashing beacon at this point?
Currently, the plan is the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, the traffic light, and the striping. That's what's been discussed.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any sketches of the intersection and the movements allowed?
We do have a traffic analysis, but we don't have those with us. We can certainly bring those at the next meeting. Oh, do you have it?
We have the traffic analysis that was prepared by their consultant.
Do you mean like
what will the intersection look like? What movements can you make as you exit the driveway?
I think that might be. There's just a conceptual kind of a diagram, but I can try to.
Oh, is it in that report? I have it, so I can.
You have the executive summary, and I don't know if that's included, but if you give me a second, I can.
Mm-hmm. On the subject of the transportation report, I think it mentions on page 148 of 278 that as a main driveway, as a main arterial, the driveways should be spaced 600 feet apart. The Falcon Way driveway and the main, I think, passenger entrance driveway are only about 200 feet apart. Is that right? So I wonder if an AAS is required for that. Page 148 of 278 addresses this. And I wonder why that would be considered safe in this case, to have 200-foot space.
So that particular sentence, I believe, is referring to the spacing between Falcon Way and the new internal road.
Right.
The collector arterial standard in the city has 600 feet. The applicant has applied for a deviation because this is from the city street standards, and we reviewed that with Public Works Engineering and Public Works Operations, and that has been approved. Now, that's a staff decision. That's why we didn't provide it to you, but that has been carefully reviewed and approved.
Okay, thanks. So an AAS then isn't required for that. It's a deviation that's handled administratively.
Right, and good question. The deviations apply to things like street standards that are outside the land use code, and AAS applies to things inside the land use part of the code.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just a couple more questions on the building, the lights from a.
Could Katie just show this diagram before we move on?
So this is showing the turning movements of that proposed intersection. So it'd be a left turn lane, a straight lane, and then right turn. I think, I'm not exactly sure. Is this talking about quantities? Perfect, you're here. Thank you.
This is the existing volume, so it doesn't show the volume. Oh, hi, I'm Jennifer Barnes. I'm with Heffron Transportation, and I led the development of the transportation report.
You're saying that's the existing?
That's the existing. Actually, the driveway, it's going to look a lot like that. There's no restriction proposed at the proposed driveway with the traffic signal. So there could be left turns in and out, right turns in and out. There would be no restrictions.
And that's from the, not Falcon, that's at the parent drop-off area?
Yeah.
And the parking garage access area, correct?
Here, I'll find the, is that our,
It says Falcon Way, that's the bus.
yeah, that's Falcon Way.
I think, yeah.
See where we're at. Oops, sorry.
Jennifer, do you see number 34 on there? Is that the one you need?
So does this, I guess, does this give the information that you want?
I think we're trying to understand if you diagrammed the new intersection and the new traffic signal, you know, if that is in there. This is the,
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
this is the December 13th one.
Okay.
The
Oh, okay,
January
so we're in the
1st one
appendix
is-
here. Okay, I know where we're at now. This is what we want. So this shows the turning movements at the proposed main driveway at Falcon Way and Talus, and also at the bus driveway and Falcon Way. And in all three cases, I mean, they're all T intersections, but there would be no turning restriction at any of those locations.
Okay,
Does that answer
your
my question? Okay, thanks.
I had a couple quick design ones. The lighting, I'm just curious, is that similar lighting that was put into the park in the Highlands, the city-owned one they just changed all the fields out to?
I don't know.
Okay.
It is, I think, the same, if not exactly the same, as the lighting put in at Issaquah Middle School.
Okay.
And we have been out testing those lights. So we'll put together some of the information. What we've found is the glare, I think to Ms. Lynch's question, the issue will probably not be anything inside Talus. I think the question will be any impacts to Newport Way. I will need to speak with Tom Mullins from the school district, who is the capital campaign, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, I don't know exact titles. But Tom and I have been working out in the field, and he was out with the lighting designer working on solutions to that. And so we'll provide some additional information in the briefing response memo based on what we've been learning in the field at the other school site, which I think will be helpful here.
Perfect. And the other one I had was more of a design from a school standpoint. I understand that single parcel land in Issaquah, especially for schools, is difficult to find. But these schools keep stacking, it seems higher and higher than a traditional school. And when looking at the design, I see a lot of stairs. I assume there's an elevator somewhere. It was kind of small. What thought is put to emergency? I'm thinking of my kids when they leave school and there's a fire drill or whatever. How many floors they have to go down, or what the process is in that?
Right. So one of the unique things about this site is that our third floor of this 5-story building is where is the main level. And so when we think about the traffic distance in case of an emergency, is that they don't have to travel a huge distance to get out to do their fire drill. They will be assembling all the students on the field area, as they do at most schools, for when they're doing the fire drills and those types of things. And the school administrative team hasn't kind of mapped out all those routes yet, but we certainly work with the fire department and making sure that we've met all codes for egress, and we've got lots of options to talk with the team about how they want to have kids move out to that field.
Okay. Thank you.
There was a public comment earlier about the bus queuing. While we're on the traffic report here, has there been a study done in terms of that queuing into Falcon Way? And I guess the other part of that question is, are the buses being stored here at this bus depot, and then they're making their way to the middle school, or are they being stored on that bus lane? Because it seems like there is a concern that turning lane into Falcon Way looks like that accommodates, what, 2-3 buses at most before the queuing could cause backup in a drive lane. Plus, you've got the parents turning in left.
So I'll let Jennifer respond to the traffic components. I'll just respond to the bus storage. The intention is not to store buses on this site. The buses would all be queued up when the students are departing at the end of the day, and then they would arrive as their routes allow in the morning. But they would not be stored on site, so those parking areas would be available for other uses after hours.
Okay.
Change the map.
So the bus arrival and departure were all considered in all of the queuing analysis that was done. And in general, the buses arriving to the site, either in the morning as they're dropping the kids off or in the afternoon as they're coming to line up to pick up the kids, they tend to be more spread out. They're not all in a platoon. And so the queuing numbers that are in our report reflect kind of the typical arrival patterns of school buses coming in. Now, the buses leaving, particularly in the afternoon, they do typically leave in a platoon. So what they do is they're all waiting there when school is dismissed. The kids load up. Nobody moves until all of the school buses are loaded, and then once all of the buses are loaded and the doors are closed, they start coming out. And that is the one time of day when we found the potential for a queue that would extend kind of past the available space on Falcon Way. But in that case, the buses would basically be queued back into the bus loop area. That's also something that the nice thing about buses, it's something that the school really can manage. So if there are kind of issues that become apparent with those types of patterns, there's measures that can be done, to instructions to the drivers to not pull up to that space until you see that the queue at Talus Drive has cleared. But I guess the short answer to your question is that was all considered in our analysis.
What time are these buses leaving? Are they leaving closer to rush hour as traffic is coming back home up Talus, or?
They haven't established the school schedule yet.
Rebecca.
Oh, sorry. They have not established the school schedule yet, and so that is all part of the work that's going to be occurring this spring.
We've got the.
Do you have the time?
Right around 3 o'clock, 3:10. They leave, well, the school day.
I'm sorry, you guys have to speak at the microphone.
So again, Jason Morris, Exec Director of Middle Schools, Issaquah School District, responding to the dismissal times. Currently, I can only speak to what we're doing currently. As we have to boundary the process and we make sure we can transport all the kids. But currently, approximately 2:45, 2:45 would be when buses would be rolling. And then on Wednesdays, it's a little later. It's more like 3:30 time frame. And then the arrival, and again, I can't speak, I mean, they don't all just show up at one time. They kind of filter in, but generally speaking, you would see probably in the 7:30 time frame as most classes start in the 8 o'clock range. The reason I'm speaking in generalities right now is we have made adjustments for some of our schools a few minutes either direction because some of those bus routes also either serve elementary schools. And so we have to get them out of the secondary school so they have time to go make their elementary route or pickup. And we've made some adjustments for other traffic concerns. But those are the general timeframes.
Okay, no, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Just a couple questions. First, a couple kind of procedural questions. Since this is, now that the Development Commission is the decision maker on permits in the Highlands and up in Talus, still trying to understand the role the commission plays versus the Architectural Review Committee. So can you, Lucy, say a little bit, you talk about it in the staff report, but a little bit about kind of the boundaries, what's in the purview of the Architectural Review Committee and then the pieces that are really in front of the commission?
Sure. I'm going to probably talk more about what's in the purview of the Architectural Review Committee. And I know this is unusual for you guys because it does take some things that you would typically look at out. So it's easier with architecture and some of the aesthetics to identify that those are the Architectural Review Committee. So for a building, the materials, colors, style would be under the Architectural Review Committee. In terms of buildings, there are certain sort of high-level urban design aspects. The examples that Katie gave were blank walls and screening of rooftop equipment. They're generally kind of from an urban design perspective. Then there are other kinds of site things. We might say that there is a bench needed someplace. The Architectural Review Committee would get to say what that looked like, what the materials were. If there's handrails, they might get to say what color they are, or again, what materials. Now, if there's a case here where the railing along Falcon is an urban design component, so we say it has to be decorative and have certain characteristics for pedestrian-friendly reasons. There could be a quite wide range of ways to solve that. The Architectural Review Committee would get to pick which solutions there were. Landscape is the toughest. At Issaquah Highlands, where I have more experience doing this, we never drew a really bright line, but I think Katie gave some really good examples. We can say, there's sort of specs, plant sizes, plant spacing. There are certain native plant requirements. We are ensuring that it's consistent with a mountain view character. The joking example I gave Katie was even if they were doing native plants, a formal French garden would not be acceptable. But short of that, as long as they are meeting our sort of broad requirements, deciding what evergreen trees, what deciduous trees, if a certain area should have more trees and less shrubs, as long as we were within our bounds, which are pretty broad, the Architectural Review Committee really gets to make those choices. Does that help?
No, that's helpful. That kind of informs some of my questions. So particularly around the landscape, and there's some fairly broad kind of parameters, I think, that are in the city's land use code, and the committee would deal with the more specific kind of implementation, let's say. So a couple quick questions related to the landscaping. One is, the top of the garage, the top deck of the parking garage, based on what I've seen so far, there's no landscaping treatment provided there. And obviously, it's a fairly significant concrete deck that's visible from above. So what is being thought about to treat the top of the parking deck and then preserving the necessary parking, which is also a premium?
So I'm going to just say one thing, and then, no, you don't have to walk away. So there is a choice that they have to make to address this. So just like any parking lot, they have to meet a 10% landscape requirement. It can be met with landscape, or it can be met with architectural elements. Mm-hmm. Now I'll let her to describe how they have chosen to meet them.
And we have integrated an architectural trellis on the upper level. It didn't show in any of the diagrams we shared.
Okay. It did look like on one of the drawings on page A104, it looks like it shows the corners to planting areas. That I presume are on the top.
Is this the page you're talking about?
Yeah. So the bottom left and the upper right?
These areas, right?
Yeah. There are 2 planting areas in the corner, and then the trellis area that I'm talking about is in this center portion.
Could you also bring up A201? If you look at the lower elevation there.
No.
You're right, just if you scoot it over a little bit.
Too far.
Far. It's not being very responsive. And I think there you go. So, yeah, you can see kind of where the hand is, that there are,
Yeah, this
or am
actually,
I seeing the building behind?
Yeah, you're actually seeing the
Okay,
building.
sorry.
That's the covered play structure, but this does, I didn't realize we had this diagram. This does show the bus shelter area as well, and the walkway to the building, so.
So we'll try it. I think there's some on some additional pages,
We can bring that in.
on like A201, 203, but we'll try and make that clear in our briefing response memo, because we've been able to review it to see that
That's part
they're
of the parking structure, yes.
meeting 10%, but we'll try and do it in a way that's easier to understand.
And you can see it, and this is actually a great view in the center here. That's the trellis area. There, on the second bullet point on the right, it says steel trellis. It's kind of little, and that's pointing to the area where her hand is.
And the intention is that's planted, or it's just screening?
It's screening.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's also quite a bit of planting around the parking garage that will grow up to.
Yeah,
to
we've got a
screen
lot
the
of
outside.
planting down low that'll grow up on the different elements of the parking structure. And then just based on the hillside and where it's sited, it's actually kind of, we were struggling to get views of it because it gets tucked into the topography.
Another question related to landscaping. Ms. Anderson noted in her public comments that this is kind of a gateway as you come into Talus, which is, there was I think a rendering that showed from SR 900 generally what it's going to look like, but I'd be interested in knowing more about what that experience will be as you now turn once the school is built and are looking up the hill. We're going to have obviously some significant retaining walls. So I think that would be, how is the kind of gateway nature of this project being addressed?
The views of the east wall from the presentation I did at the end.
One moment, please.
So we've been working through that with Ken and looking at what the aesthetic is of those walls. And what we have proposed is a sculpted finish to those walls that has a mountain view experience, so.
But I also think, Rebecca, that some of the materials that you and Kim put together for Ken that were the views up Talus Drive might be more evocative of what that would look like to answer Commissioner Brennan.
Yeah, so is this the view that you're talking about where you would be looking at?
No, I'm not, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
That's part of the treatment of the hillside of the retaining wall, but it's actually as you're turning and coming
I
to
see.
Talus, what's the perspective going to look
Right.
like to people entering the
Yeah,
neighborhood?
and I don't believe we have that in any of our presentations,
You
but
had
we
the
can bring it to the next one.
You had the SR 900 shot right at the end of your presentation.
Yes, this one. But you can't see any of those walls because of the landscaping. So you only see those walls when you've got a different view. So we have done some studies of that and with our work with Ken, and we can follow up with those views. Yeah.
So just to interrupt, the proposed landscaping will reach that height, or is this just a rendering? Or is this literal? I mean, those trees seem quite tall and they appear to.
There's a lot of existing landscaping, and so when you're looking from SR 900, you see a lot of the existing landscaping.
Okay.
It is It is something that we generated through computer software, but it's leveraging, all the great imagery that is actual conditions.
Okay.
So it's very lifelike.
Plus there'll be supplemental landscape in addition to what's there.
Right.
While we're looking at this view, is there a planned location for signage? Calling out the name of the school? I mean, is that planned towards the intersection, or is that just signage on the building itself?
So we're looking at signage in this entry view. And we don't have it all shown, but we would be looking at this as the approach and the entry experience. We wouldn't be doing signage down on SR 900.
So no monument signs or anything of that
Not
sort?
down on SR 900, no.
Okay.
Yep, it would be at this entry to the school site off Talus.
Okay. We were looking at the elevations earlier. On page 59 of 278 in the package, on the north and south elevations, I'm curious as how the applicant is addressing those blank walls.
These walls up to the left here.
Let's see, is that
which one?
yeah, I guess
Sorry.
that would be the north elevation, right? And then there's a red box around a portion of the south elevation as well. So yes, north and south there. Yeah, that page, exactly.
I don't have an answer yet,
Okay.
but we have had that identified just recently, and so we're looking at how to respond.
Okay.
We're balancing, as you know, with the school building, we're balancing the teachers' need for wall space for all of their, resources that they use in teaching and the natural windows that are desired, so.
And so on that, would the ARC have approval authority for that blank wall treatment? Now that we've specified the blank walls need to be treated, or who wouldn't have that?
Right. The city would be looking for some kind of appropriate treatment. The ARC could say, we might say modulate the wall, and they might say, no, we want applied elements, and that would be their purview to say that that would be the appropriate solution.
Is that the same regarding roofline modulation as well, Lucy? I know there's on Part B of Goals and Guidelines for Talus, there's a requirement specific to roofline modulation. So, looking at, for example, the east elevation, level 5, I'm not seeing a whole lot of roofline modulation there. I'm just seeing a straight line of the coping all the way across. So would that be in our purview, or is that the
ARC to decide if there is sufficient modulation.
Okay.
I have another question for the applicant. I think pedestrian safety is a big concern. And one thing I didn't hear addressed was that journey from the parking garage to the front door of the school. I see where the crosswalk is there, but is there, I can imagine that area is going to be heavily congested during certain points of the day. Are there any signals or safety features at that crosswalk for faculty or staff or children coming from the parking lot to there? It's a bit of a blind corner. It's in a pretty good spot, but I could see somebody running out there and somebody's late, whipping in there.
Yeah, so this plaza area is being developed to really designate that this is an area where there will be crossing of pedestrians and that this is the prime entrance to the building. We do also have the opportunity for students that are getting dropped off to come directly up into the covered play area as well. And so we talked about the students will be coming from the overhead walkway into the building. So though there'll be 900 students coming to the site, I share that in that they'll be coming and arriving in multiple points at the building. I don't know if someone from the school district might be able to speak a little bit more specifically about how they manage students as they arrive on campus and how they make sure that they're making safe choices. So.
Are any traffic calming mechanisms planned on that incoming drive? Any speed bump, anything else that
Yes.
could?
You wanna-
Oh, you can address that.
Yeah, so the, part of the reason that there is this change in texture is to recognize the need to drive slower, and we do have designated crossing paths and things along that nature to mitigate the speed through there.
Tom Mullins with the school district. Any of the areas that are deemed heavily pedestrian by students will be done with crossing guards, people with flags. If it ends up that a lot of students come down the crosswalk by the garage on the east side or from the parking garage, there'll be a person out there with a flag making sure they cross safely.
Does that include during sporting events as well? Or is that during?
Only during school hours. We don't provide any personnel after school hours.
Another question on that inbound passenger street that transitions to a drive. Is that about 28 feet there? Is it 10 and 10 plus 8 for parking? Is that the width of the street before it transitions to the drive?
Yeah, that's accurate. It's about 20, that is accurate. It's about 28 feet.
That isn't, is any of that incoming street divided at all? I couldn't tell from the plans.
There is a slight separation right in this location for those that are turning right versus those that are going left or coming in.
I guess I'm wondering about the possibility of parents making a U-turn right here instead of going all the way down to that very long loop, not at busy times of the day, but other times of the day. So I guess there's nothing that would prohibit that, correct?
Yeah, I mean, there are, people are people. When school is in session, there's a lot that can be done by the school district, but at other times, we rely on other resources.
Gotcha.
I'm thinking about weather protection here a little bit, and can you clarify where the waiting period is for pickup? Would that be in the covered play area, or are students waiting right outside that entrance in what looks like underneath some canopies or benches there?
Yeah, so there's covered waiting right in this location at the front entryway,
Okay.
and then there's another covered waiting area right in this location.
Okay. And then the yellow is the bike area, is that correct? Bicycle parking?
Yes, somehow I hit the wrong button. But yes, you are accurate.
And does that have cover over it? Weather protection?
Does the bus parking have cover? No.
The bike parking?
The bike parking does not.
But there is more bike parking in the garage, so about half of it is on the plaza and half is in the garage.
Okay.
So there is a place for covered bike
parking.
Got it. Thank you.
On the subject of bikes, in the area right there where the bike traffic can come in up at the top, yeah, and they're going to be sharing a 10-foot sidewalk right there. Has thought been given to possibly marking the sidewalk, bikes in this area, pedestrians this area, so they don't collide?
Yeah, so as Tom mentioned, when we have all the school flaggers out there and the school administration is overseeing the pickup and the drop-off time, they have discussed that they typically at their school sites establish a walking zone for bikes, and the students right about where that star is would need to dismount their bikes.
I think Ms. Commissioner Sanford is asking a different question.
Oh, sorry.
Which is that from the red section north of the star, I think he's wondering if the 10-foot sidewalk will be divided between users, like a stripe painted to clarify pedestrians on one side, bicyclists on the
Exactly.
other.
Picture at Green Lake. Right.
We have not discussed that topic yet.
So parking might be a good topic to talk about real quick. So in the staff report, it talks about special events, and I know there was a detailed parking study done on this, where there were several events, special events that were going to admittedly exceed the parking level that's provided. And there's no close proximity neighborhood streets on near this site where overflow parking could readily happen. So there were different mitigation measures suggested. Can you speak a little bit more about where the school district is in actually arriving at solutions on those mitigation measures? For example, the first one was a shuttle and shuttling. I don't know if that's something the school district has done for other sites and how that happens. And just one other concern noted, I think the condition suggested that prior to issuance of a temporary certificate of occupancy, those mitigation measures would be agreed to. I think that's too late. I think you need to decide that before the building permit gets issued. So what's the mitigation to deal with special event parking overflow on this property?
Go ahead.
When the permit's issued?
As a former middle school administrator, I was a principal of Maywood Middle School when that school was approximately 1,100 students, which is a very good-sized middle school. One of the things that we did to mitigate traffic and parking lot space, particularly on nights such as a curriculum night or back-to-school night or whatever we call it, was to work with our district transportation staff to set up shuttle parking. One strategy that I've used in the past was to use a neighboring campus of the ISD that didn't have an event, and we parked parents there and then shuttled them via school bus. I like to think it adds to the experience of curriculum night because you get to ride a school bus. It is possible, just based, I actually drove that today. We could possibly shuttle from our Holly Street site, which is the former admin building site, because we have parking in that area. I'm not sure about permitting or asking permission, but we do have Tibbetts around the corner if that's a spot that we could arrange a shuttle. But that is something that has been done in the past. I personally did that as a principal, and it's definitely possible.
Thanks.
One question, there was a mention of possibly parking on the athletic field. Did that ever happen, or would that cause too much damage?
Boy, I would have to reference that to an architect.
Yeah, it would cause too much damage to this field, and it also was not factored into any of our scenarios for access to that. The only access to the field is for emergency situations.
One of the more problematic times, I guess, identified there was 8th grade commencement during the day. What's the possibility of moving that to nighttime event? What's the school district's feeling on that?
That's an administrative question.
Again, I've experienced both. I've experienced 8th grade commencement during the school day, and I've also experienced it after hours, like say 6 o'clock in the evening, and then just shortly after school in the 3 to 5 range. All of those options can work. Typically, my experience is there is input from the building administration on when events such as that take place, and then we also, at least I did as a principal, like to work with my community of parents, grandparents, friends, neighbors who are attending those commencements, and work with either my PTSA, my parent-teacher council, to decide when those commencements happened. Currently, I think at 2 or 3 of my buildings, they happen during the daytime, and I think I have at least one building that happens in the evening time. So there is no set rule around that. Typically, that's something that the school and the parent groups of the students who are commencing from 8th grade come to an agreement there.
Thanks. Is there a condition regarding that parking management plan? I think I may have seen one, but I'm not sure. It has to be generated and approved. Yeah, thank you.
I have a question on page 14 of the staff report. Under the flooring ratio, it says the applicant has proposed establishing a tract of land surrounding the trail, which would also be deducted. Didn't really understand that. What's it mean by establishing a tract of land? Does it mean a tract of public land, parkland?
A separate piece of property, which would, at this time, we're not proposing that it be owned by someone else, but it could be. it just isn't part of the school site. Most of the south end is graded to fit the get that trail in and accommodate the stairs and all the different grade changes.
It wouldn't be counted as part of the school track then, what we're looking at. Okay, thank you. A couple different questions, sort of just based on where I saw them in the report, but page 29, it talked about an elevated crosswalk at Falcon Way as a requirement, I think. And I wondered if that is a problem for buses at all to go over an elevated crosswalk, or if that's not a problem?
We have spent a lot of time talking about that, and the engineer for the school district had a solution that he felt would work for both the school buses and keeping a perceived constant sidewalk grade.
Okay.
We want to ensure it works for both sets of users.
Both, okay. So in that, any condition for that would be addressed then? Or?
I'm not sure.
Not in a condition, just a requirement that would be.
There is a condition requiring that there be a constant grade, and we have talked about the specifics of the construction detail that would allow us to meet that condition and be suitable for buses, and we felt like we came to something that would achieve that.
Great, thank you. And on page 32, the discussion about the trail connection through the loop. So the discussion at the bottom of 32, which says it connects into the rest of the site only at the southernmost point of the passenger loop. This is an appropriate point of connection through the bus loop.
Oh.
And does that, it's supposed to be through the passenger loop, I presume?
Yes.
Okay. And then my question was, in that map at the top of page 33, it made me, it seems strange that we would put a pathway through the middle of the loop as opposed to just having a walkway around the edge of the loop, so people didn't have to cross through the middle of a traffic loop.
When we originally identified that concern, we had it going around the outside, as you suggested, and that is a rather steep wall at this time. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think that they felt that there was a way to incorporate it on the edge relative to the wall, which is why we looked at going through the middle. But let us talk about it a little more, and we'll provide more information in the briefing response.
And I imagine it's not going to get a lot of use probably, but still potential. I guess one of my big concerns on page 33, the discussion of the service yard and the loading dock and that walkway, and I wondered if we could pull up that section and zoom in on that to try to get, number one, a better understanding, because I think I saw something that showed that they would be roll-up doors for the loading dock area.
You want to look at the
Probably the overhead shot first.
the aerial, if you look at maybe in my presentation, the enlarged plan.
Here, I'll let you navigate it.
Yeah, so the extent that you can zoom down into that.
You need to go into slideshow. So your zooms. There you go. There we go. So the service area is on this portion of the site. There's right where this line is where we have a covered roof area. The dumpsters are below that roof, and the loading dock area is adjacent to it. The wall that the bikes are in front of adds to screening for that area. And when the deliveries, which would be coordinated with the beginning and the end of the school day, they would not be conflicting. That's something that the school district has recognized that they need to coordinate. The trucks would be backed into this location here to do their deliveries or to pick up the trash.
So it looked like the way that the bicycle wall that stuck out, it didn't, I mean, it fairly narrowed down for all these kids that might be dropped off to the south of there and are walking along there, because it's also shown as a drop-off area essentially right in front of the service area. It looked like that sidewalk got fairly narrowed right around where the bicycle wall was.
So it is not narrowed. Yeah, it's not narrowed there. If you think about the sidewalk width down here, it actually starts to get a little bit wider and then opens up to this plaza area. We can provide some more detail with some dimensions to make that clear so you can understand how that would be functioning.
Because I guess it, from a SID standpoint, from a design standpoint, if this were an office building or something like that, and we had somebody saying, we're going to put the trash can enclosure right on sort of the main drop-off area, it would be a concern. I can see how we have constraints of where you get things, but what this is going to appear like, because I know the trash areas and loading areas aren't always kept up that well. And that's, I guess, design-wise, one of my concerns about what that looks like. And maybe that's more an ARC issue, but.
Yeah, and
I would say the specific mechanism is the ARC, but the fact that there is a mechanism that both protects people who are walking there and screens it is an urban design aspect. We have a condition, number 18, that starts that, but I think that this would be a good area to kind of zoom in on and apply more dimensions and some additional information to understand how that might work, because I think we wrote the condition because we shared some of the same concerns.
Great.
And that is why we're proposing an overhead coiling door to cover the trash in that loading area. That's not something we typically do at schools, so we are looking at providing screening for that area.
That's great, thank you. And this is a minor question, but page 54, I was trying to figure out on the table on replacement trees, where there was a number of significant trees required was 205, and trees remaining were 3, and the balance was 201. Should that be 202? Since we have school people here, I just want to make sure we're getting
doing the math.
Yeah.
Doing the math.
Anybody need a calculator?
I can't see any reason why it would not be.
Okay.
I don't know if there was a number that I got wrong. I mean, obviously one of the numbers is wrong, but I'm not sure if it came from me or from the report.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding okay. And the pedestrian bridge, I guess it's not a bridge, it's, well, crosswalk. Does it fall under any of the sky bridge requirements in Central Issaquah design, or the sky bridge only for the Costco development agreement?
No, there are Skybridge provisions that I believe we added to Central Issaquah. Let me take a look. I didn't really think about it that way, so let us take a look at that.
Okay, thank you. And then, so condition 11 about the reducing the lane width to 10 feet, it sounds like the city's going to change that to, would you require but ask them to do an administrative adjustment of standards to apply for that to get an adjustment?
So they originally showed 11-foot lanes, and the standard for the road is 10. And staff had a conversation as part of this bigger review and landed on 10, on staying with 10. And Timber Ridge gave us some of their thoughts, so we went back to revisit it. And I think that although the standard is 10, and we normally don't like to go above 10 because of speeds and lots of things, it's such a short distance that we could see their point. We've had preliminary conversations with Public Works Engineering, And right now, our plan is to have the school district request the adjustment of standards to allow what they originally showed, and hopefully that we would have processed that decision and include it in the briefing response memo when the packet comes back to you for the February meeting.
Great, thank you. It sounded reasonable, so, okay. That's all I've got.
More questions?
Regarding the service area, I'm in agreement with Commissioner Morgan. I think it'd be great to see some additional detail, possibly in a large plan, even a kind of an interior shot of that, as whether you're a kid or someone getting out of the car, because that whole drop-off lane, I'm really seeing students, getting out of their cars at a much earlier point than that. So I guess the other part of that question, or that statement, which is a question, that parking along that drop-off or that loop, is that staff parking or is that visitor part-time parking? I mean, are there going to be cars parked there the full day, those parallel spots?
So during the school day, it would not be open to anyone to parallel park. We have adequate parking during the school day. We believe we have more than 40 stalls that won't be used by the 80 staff members, and that will be available all the time for parents that might be coming to the school. Okay. In front of it, what I've heard from the administrators in the district, that's plenty. Okay. They just don't get the same parent involvement that they do at elementary levels. So that's the approach. Okay.
So what I would just add, because I agree with everything Rebecca said, is that I think that what the school district perceived was this opportunity to have sort of some multifunctional uses for both of those loops in off hours. So if there was an evening event that needed more parking, they would be striped and signed to explain when and how that parallel parking, either on the bus loop or the passenger loop, would be available. So as Rebecca indicated, it wouldn't be available during the school day or school hours, but it would be off-hours parking to expand what's available, and it's about 40 more stalls.
Okay. That's great. Thank you. Appreciate the clarification. I guess while I've got the mic, on the rendering as you're entering the school from Talus Drive, could you go to that image really quickly?
Sure.
Thank you. So looking at that and then looking at the plan, the site plan, I guess, I'm seeing a parking or a landscape island there at that turning lane as you turn east and south on Talus Drive. Can you confirm that there's going to be a landscape island there, or is this the correct representation of that intersection?
This does not accurately represent what's in that site diagram.
Okay.
Good catch.
And I believe the technical term is pork chop.
Pork chop. Got it. Thank you.
Additional questions?
I have a traffic question again. There was a lot of public comment about the Talus Drive and SR 900 intersection. And was there any impact from the school on that intersection?
There's a little impact. The additional traffic would add delay at that intersection, but part of the mitigation, that is one of the conditions we understand of the project, is to reoptimize the traffic signal at that location, and then that would address that. And the operation that we found with the school traffic and with the optimization, if you're familiar with how the grades work of level of service A through F, the standard for that location is actually E, is a state facility, and the level of service that we found actually with and without the project was level of service C. So a little more delay, but not a huge difference.
Okay.
I'm sorry, or were you done?
I've got more.
Okay, go ahead.
If it's on
well,
that
it's on this topic. So it's a delay for northbound traffic specifically?
Need to pull the mic closer.
Sorry, short. So that's the average delay, and where the biggest increase was in that northbound right turn lane, which is not very heavily used under current conditions, and that's where we would expect, because anybody accessing the school from the south would be using that, so.
I think, Jennifer, you meant northbound left turn lane?
Yes, is
Okay.
that not what I said?
No.
Sorry.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
And then I think a lot of the public comments were maybe before the intersection was included in the project, but are there any other traffic calming measures that make sense to incorporate with the intersection?
With that intersection?
Yeah, sorry, the one further up.
At Talus Drive.
At the school
and the
entrance.
driveway.
Yeah.
So, do you want me to answer the traffic calming? The traffic signal itself should have some effect on slowing down the traffic. The fact that there would be more traffic will have some effect in slowing down the traffic, and then the school zone speed limit would have an effect. So the bottom line is that the project itself and the measures that are being recommended with it should be beneficial to the speeds on Talus Drive. Now, we haven't actually said that's absolutely the last thing that should ever be done on Talus Drive. Our data did show that there is speeding regularly, and even though the state database numbers weren't as high as what the presentation was, our findings were consistent. All of the collisions for which there was data were due to excessive speeds, mostly in wet or icy conditions. The city does have a process to go through for traffic calming, and I know the school district would be supportive of supporting going through that process. But as far as the effects of the project itself, we feel like the measures that we've identified to help address the operational and safety issues will have a benefit for traffic calming. That doesn't necessarily mean that needs to be the end of it as far as the city is concerned, but the project itself should have a beneficial effect.
Related questions on Talus Drive. I wanted to bring up a couple of points submitted by the community. There's been concern expressed that parents are going to idle by the side of Talus Drive to pick up and discharge kids. Do we have any mitigation for that? Has any thought been given to anything we can do to prevent that from happening on Talus Drive, say a bit south of the passenger loop?
I would say, so there's kind of three things that help prevent that. And the first and the most important one is just a good site design, where it's easy to get on, it's easy to circulate, know where you're going, and it's easy to get off the site. A lot of the time what we find when there's a lot of that kind of rogue dropping off going on, it's because it's harder to go on the site than it is to just not go on the site. So the district's design team put a lot of effort into making sure that there's good flow, there would be good flow on the site, and that it's easy to get in, easy to get out, and very intuitive what to do once you get there. The other piece of that is that Talus Drive just isn't it's not like a residential road where it's easy to pull over, and just like a local access road, it's actually illegal to stop on Talus Drive. So I guess my recommendation would be is if somebody actually dared to do that, or if that turned out to be a problem, that there should be enforcement that would go with that and stop that, because that would actually be an illegal maneuver on Talus Drive.
Are there any no stopping, no standing signs on Talus Drive now, or might they be incorporated in part of the site design?
We can follow up with the city.
Yeah.
Okay, and another big concern from the community was, is there any other option for exiting from Talus in case of emergency going downhill? It seems as though there's one lane going downhill there, and some various options have been explored, including the road to Newport, and I know that was not an approved option. So are there any other options being considered for exiting downhill in case of an emergency? an additional lane on the right side at the bottom or anything like that? Are there any other ideas?
One thing to build on that is that I know that John Bush Drive over is similar to Black Nugget for the Highlands. Is that set up so it's a gated entry for that situation where it gets opened by emergency services?
Yes, so the second entrance and exit for emergency purposes is James Bush Road, and it is gated off. It's steeper than we feel is appropriate, doesn't meet city standards to be used as a everyday road. But you're right, in an emergency, it could be. So there isn't an official exit that's in this part of town. I think that if there was an emergency, it might, with appropriate flagging, all the lanes could be exit lanes, for instance. You know, with the decision to not pursue a connection through Bergsma, we're left with the exit choices that were originally provided with the community.
Additional questions?
One that was raised by the community that may be more appropriate at a later stage, I don't know, but it does look like a lot of opportunity for green building here. Has any discussion been raised regarding solar panels, especially on that large southern exposure? Are the windows operable, soil repurposing, and so on?
So this school, like many schools that we do in the state of Washington, we design them being mindful of the Washington Sustainable Schools Protocol. And as a part of that, there are requirements for daylighting of spaces. There are operable windows proposed. We have lighting control systems that manage the amount of and how the lighting works throughout the day, whether it's through occupancy or daylight controls. We have LED lighting throughout the building. We work with our mechanical engineer to have a really efficient mechanical system for this site. And there are lots of strategies that we integrate as far as how the building is constructed, the materials that are a part of the building. And through that process, we have fixtures that have low water usage as a part of this. So
Okay, great, thank you.
Thinking about community engagement, that path along the south there that runs behind the field, I assume Timber Ridge residents will be using that, right? I mean, they'll just kind of on their daily walks. And thinking about that tie-in into the field, would they need to go request a key card if they want to walk the field, or is the field just locked down during the weekends? Is this simply just during the day, you need permission, and that's the only time you would go that route?
So what, at the community meeting, what was shared with the community is that the school district current policy is that you can go to district offices and as a resident request either a key card or a key to access the school's facilities after hours. I think the only restriction might be just making sure that they're accessing it during daylight or when it's lit. So.
Okay. So they may not have access to on the weekends. Am I understanding that correctly?
They would have access if they had gotten that card and that key, and it wasn't scheduled for other events.
Okay.
I would just articulate what was said at the end. If the field is actually rented and paid for by another organization, that organization would have precedence for using the field. If the field is not rented out or unused, then a resident would be able to go to the school office, provide their information, get a key, and then access the key during hours that it's lit, and during non-school activity hours. For various safety reasons, we don't allow access for that usage when there's, for example, like a school track meet happening or something like that.
Understood. Thank you.
Most of the time, they're controlled access, correct, where there's a chain link fence that
Yes.
throughout the entire perimeter of it, and they can't get onto it during school.
Yeah, correct. During the school day, there will be openings, so kids can exit the building to go outside and use the field for, say, PE classes and things of that nature. But those would be supervised by staff, and not, we wouldn't have interest in having community members enter in those locations. And during after hours, the fences would be locked, and then someone who had gone through the process to check out an access key or access card, depending if it's a key or a card, would then be able to access that field during those after hours times.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Regarding screening the parking garage, is that the wire mesh panel material that's being considered for the garage screening?
That is part of it, yes. It's not for the vertical areas. The trellis that was discussed has a different makeup than that, but that is for the vertical screening that the plants would grow on.
So do we have a requirement to make the screening opaque so that headlights cannot be seen in the garage?
Yes.
Yeah. Is this an area that's still under discussion? It's hard to imagine that being an opaque screen.
So as you look at the parking garage area, a lot of the areas that we would be using that screen, the headlights that you're talking about would be shining back onto our property. This edge of the parking structure and this corner that goes towards Falcon Way, that is mostly buffered by the hillside. And then the areas that stick up above, I believe it's a solid masonry wall. And we can follow up with more detail for all of those areas.
Okay.
Condition 27 talks about opaque for headlights.
Does that include the top level of the garage? Because I think I saw on the site plan there is a development across the street, right? Is that an apartment complex across the Talus Drive, or am I looking at?
Not across Talus Drive. That's a little further to the west. But the end part of condition 27 talks about the need for a 5-foot barrier, and that part of that purpose is for headlights.
Okay.
More questions?
I guess only one more from me regarding community concern regarding the lighting on the sports field. In light of our experience with Issaquah Middle School, is there a way that we can ensure that lights are not powered on in this facility until they're approved?
Well, it's such a different circumstance. I'm not particularly concerned about that because they're being permitted at the same time. And I think the challenge that we faced at Issaquah Middle School is that they had been installed without being fully permitted. And so we had to ensure that what was installed actually complied with code. We have a much greater sense of what's being designed right now already complies with code because of the work we did at Issaquah Middle School.
Okay, great. Thank you.
The SEPA, it was hopeful that it would be available before our next meeting. Will this project come back to the Development Commission before that is approved? Before that is finalized? Okay, all right. Just
We'll go without it.
I do have one final question. Since there was a comment from community regarding the sound, the speaker systems, intercoms, whatever that may be on the field, how do you mitigate that? I mean, are there systems out on the market that offer a reduced decibel or reduced noise, or how do you test for something like that, or is there just typical standard that all schools use?
So the conversations that have been occurring have been looking at strategies like signage on the field to remind coaches and other groups that if, as they're warming up their players out there, that amplified music is not allowed on the site. So those are the strategies that we've talked about. And then as an administrative team, they have to work with their staff.
Okay.
no built-in speakers or anything like that is planned for the site.
Okay.
More questions? How about comments? Anybody wish to make a comment?
I'll start off. Number one, a really thorough and well-written staff report, and want to compliment Katie and Lucy for putting this together, because it was, it's a very extensive and innovative project and a great staff report, and I really also appreciate all the work that's been done by the architect and the school district and working with the public and help they've provided putting all this together. It's a very complicated site and interesting approach at it. The parking question, I agree with the idea of using a traffic management plan. In reading the report, it appeared to me that there's only somewhere between 9 and 24 times a year that there would be more parking demand than what is there, depending on concerts and so forth. And I would prefer to create a lot of extra parking stalls on the school property just for that amount of time. And also, I think it helps parents to learn how to carpool a little bit too, if they can get together with friends and maybe go together, because I know we did that at Pine Lake Middle School at certain nights. So I also agree with the 11-foot widths for Falcon Way for the travel widths, and I appreciate the comments that were made by the person from Talus. That was very helpful, or from Timber Ridge, sorry. And the things that I would like to see at the next meeting, I think Commissioner Brennan brought up a very good point about what this would look like as you're driving up Talus Drive, that view of the wall and the school, and a depiction of that would be very helpful. I think the close-ups of the elevations of the service area and what that's going to look like for people walking by there, kids getting dropped off, what they're going to see, how that is going to feel, and then more information on the pedestrian bridge as well, the school kid bridge. So thank you all very much.
I would say if there are any speed control measures that can be added at this point in time with this process, I understand there's other processes and ways to go about it, but if there's anything that can be done as part of this, I would like to see that. Condition 20 is about the parking, and there was mention of reviewing that on an annual basis, but that's not in the condition, so if that could be added. That's it for me.
No addition.
Just a quick comment. I agree with the previous comments from the commissioners regarding the additional information. Also, I want to emphasize as well the appreciation for the great work preparing the staff report documents and the plans, and a very creative design for a challenging piece of property for a school, but also recognizing that the school is an asset to the community, and it really, when this is built and in operation, I think will be just a wonderful thing. Understanding the challenges that the school district has at trying to find property that works for the purposes of the school. So I think all things considered, I think the overall design is a good solution at a location that I think will work, even with its challenges. The parking management, I agree. The parking management is something I want to hear more about. How we're going to do that to ensure that for those special events that we have a solution, I think, that minimizes the potential for problems on the property and for adjacent properties. I wanted to emphasize that. Also agree with lane width on Falcon Way and finding a solution that allows for that wider width there, given the circumstances with the short distance of the road there, the introduction of buses coming and going, et cetera. It seems to make sense to me as well. And also a final comment that was made, just want to emphasize the idea of the school district's ethic regarding sustainability and kind of enhancing our environment. Anything that you can do to include sustainable development solutions into the project, I think is a great thing. That is something that is a strong ethic for the city of Issaquah. I think the school district shares that one, and obviously it benefits us all. So anything you can do to advance that would be great.
I echo my fellow commissioners' comments. Again, great report. Thank you very much. An excellent presentation from the applicant. I'm in agreement on widening that Falcon Way. I think there's a lot going on between the service areas and the buses and the service areas that are really providing service to Timber Ridge. I mean, there's a lot of information there. Again, I don't travel up that road frequently, but due to the size of the development, I'm sure there's a lot of service that's going on back there. I would like to see a little bit more information about the pedestrian bridge, especially considering that it's sloped, looking at the elevation. I am starting to get a little bit worried about not being covered with that slope that's happening there. So again, how are we going to provide protective measures from stuff being thrown over and kids taking advantage of that? I think that's it. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Could I ask one follow-up question? I wanted to follow up on Commissioners Brennan and Shore's comment about the parking management plan, which is condition, as you identified, 20. I think the intent was that in condition number 1, that it's part of that sort of monitoring, and I just ask if you could take a look for a second and see if that's the way it reads to you. We're happy to fine-tune them, but I don't want to tell you we've already done it when you read it and don't think it's been done.
Can you give me a page number?
Oh, yes, it's 79 out of 278 and 82 out of 278. And you're also welcome to read it at your leisure and let us know in the next couple of days. I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
I think it does, reading condition 20 regarding the specifics of the parking management plan. I guess what caught me when I read that was just the timing of when you're trying to reach agreement of what aspects will be included in that parking management plan. Because if you can't come to agreement and you've got a building that's built, now what?
No, I think your point's well made, and I think we'll look back on the timing. And so maybe it was more Commissioner Shore's. I just wanted to point out in the second paragraph of number 1 that it includes on and off-site special event parking procedures, and so that was our intent. So just think about that and let us know if you think that is not getting at the point you're making in terms of monitoring it.
Yeah, I think there's just no definitive timeline. The plan will specify the frequency and the timing of the reporting. So can the timing or the frequency be specified at this point in time?
Thank you.
On a different note, I did forget to mention the blank facade treatments. It would be great to see how you guys are addressing that as well on those elevations on page, I think 58 it was. So thank you. Thanks again.
All right, I think that without further comment, we will adjourn tonight's meeting to our regularly scheduled Development Commission meeting on February 5th. At 7 p.m. in the council chambers. And the item on tonight's meeting agenda, the public hearing for the site development permit for the middle school number 6 will be continued in that meeting. But before we go, once again, I would like to express my appreciation for the excellent work that the residents, the public have made on, I think the project is better for the comments that you make, and I hope that, as we said, if there are people that have been watching this process and didn't feel like driving down, we'd still like to hear your comments, and as I said, we'd like to hear them earlier than later, but you still have an opportunity to be a participant in this process, and only as you participate can we redeem our responsibility to make sure that your concerns are cared for. So thank you very much, and drive safe. It's probably going to be a little slick out there, so we're adjourned.
Thank you.